Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Items of the Week. I'm Lori Williamson from the Collections Department at the Minnesota Historical Society, and with me, as always, is Sandra Ryerson, 3D Objects Curator. Hi.
Hello, good to see you, Lori.
You too. I'm really excited this week because this is our request show. We asked people if there was something they wanted to see, and we got some really interesting suggestions. So it should be a lot of fun. So let's get started. This all request show started with the first suggestion, which is, what is the pinkest thing in the collection? And this immediately came to mind, Le Petit Slurp. Sandra, what can you tell me about this? Please save me. It's so scary.
Yeah, and this is actually the least scary slurp that I saw in my research. This came to us pretty recently, actually, but it dates to the 1960s. So Spectacular Products, Inc., which later became Princess Soft Toys, was a Cannon Falls company, and they employed high school kids at their factory. And yeah, there's a whole line of these Furby-looking things. It's like the earlier generation of Furbies, and in my experience.
There's so many weird things about that. The fact that they were made by high school kids somehow seems right to me. The fact that this from the 60s is not surprising at all. But also, she's like, I mean, the box does say fun to own and to comb. So I guess that's the point.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta take care of your slurp.
But anyway, it's fascinating, and I'm so glad that we have the box with it. That just really adds to it.
So. Yeah, and if you look these up online, we have the least creepy version because a lot of them have these like big bug eyes and they're bloodshot. It's very strange.
Okay, well, anyway, thanks, Cannon Falls. Okay. Oh my goodness. Look at those.
Yes. Some can't go without a pink stiletto, right? Yeah. Again, 1960s. What can you say? Some good stuff came out of the 60s. So these are synthetic leather, needlepoint toes, have spike heels. They got a little bow at the throat of the shoe. They're super cute. They're by Smart Air footwear, and they've got a 3 3/8 inch heel, which is a little much for me. Oh yeah, and Pink in Politics we have here. So from 1918. So we've talked about the that year quite a bit on these episodes.
Quite a bit. A lot happened.
Yes, but one of those things was the push for prohibition, and so here you have a pink ballot urging you to vote for prohibition in 1918.
That's fascinating. I did not know that ballot was pink. I mean, I've seen this ad before, but I guess it just never really occurred to me that the ballot was pink. That's
I mean, prohibition was pushed by women mostly, right? The Women's Christian Temperance Union. I mean, it's a really interesting moment in time.
Yes, indeed.
And then, of course, you've got the inverted triangle. So this is fast forwarding in time again. This one probably dates to the 1990s. We got it in the late 90s. But the symbol originated as a badge to identify homosexual men in Nazi concentration camps, but it became a symbol of LGBTQ rights and the movement for those rights.
Like, right away what it is. So it's very nice.
Yeah, if you understand the symbol, you know exactly what.
Right.
And of course, we have a political hat here. So the Pussy hat from 2017. This one was actually knit by our very own Ann Thayer. She's a colleague at MNHS. And she wore this at the Women's March in Washington, D.C. in 2017. So it's pretty great. Of course, you don't get the cat ear effect when it's laying flat. But
I can see that they're there, though. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I can see it. So, what about the other hat, though? That's lovely.
Yeah, so this one, the high-crowned pink straw hat from the 1910s. This one has pink ostrich plumes and fabric roses. And she's just lovely and very pink.
Very pink.
These are all images of the same wool traveling suit, pink wool.
Wow.
1906, made by a local dressmaker, and you can read more about Julia in the Minnesota Dressmakers page that a former curator put together. But she was a St. Paul dressmaker, and this particular dress was featured at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts when we did a collaborative exhibit just last year. On the Art of High Style, Minnesota Couture.
Do we have any idea how many layers are under it? Because that's clearly an overdress.
Yeah, our textile conservator, Anne, spent a lot of hours on this piece. And And she, because of the way the sleeves are in particular, it's very fragile at this point. And so getting the jacket on the dress ever again is a question mark. But it was displayed as you see it on the far left at Mia. And so Anne could tell you all about the layers of this thing, but I don't know it in quite that detail.
The jacket is really lovely, but it hides all the tremendous bodice work, which is just kind of a shame. I can't believe this much detail would go into travel. Like, I can't imagine wearing something like this on a long trip.
Yeah, this was definitely meant for a classy lady.
Classier than I.
And so another dressmaker, Lori, do you know Madame Boyd?
I do a little bit, just to know that she was a big deal.
Yeah. So Madame Boyd was the cream of the crop as far as dressmakers go. And she made the dress on the left, which is also the center image. So you see front and back here. And this is from the 19-teens. You start to see some of those military things working their way into fashion. And so this is 1915 or 16. So after World War I has started. So you start to see those elements working their way into women and menswear. We saw it in children's clothing a while back.
Yeah.
And then on the right is a much more recent piece, still very pink. So this was made by Cherry So. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. And it was retailed at Reach Together. It's a Karen organization in St. Paul. And you can really see the traditional Karen weaving techniques put into a contemporary garment. So it's, a simple pink empire waisted dress, but with some of those traditional techniques. And it's really cool to see traditional culture making its way into Minnesota with the immigrant community. And now for something completely different.
Completely different, not pink at all. Yeah, so another request that we had were for writing utensils. And so we have a good bit of writing utensils in the collection. So we'll start with pencils and also pen, I think.
Yeah, a pen at the very top there. That one is branded Miss Minneapolis Flour from the Minneapolis Milling Company, circa 1950. You can see it wasn't in use. This would have come from our flour milling collection.
We have a lot of kind of promotional pencils, probably because people needed them and they were cheap to produce. But we have a lot of branded pencils, and if you're interested, obviously go to Collections Online and you can see them all for yourself.
Yeah, and that's kind of an area where our priorities are shifting in collecting. So now when I look at promotional material, I'm much more interested in things that better represent the business. So a pencil is very useful, and if it's the only thing we can get to document a business, sure. But a flour sack represents this business better than a pencil, for example.
Yeah. It is interesting to see kind of some of the branding imagery and things like that on things like this, like Miss Minneapolis Flour. It's just so cutesy. So
yeah.
What do we know about the pen below it?
Yes, this one dates to the Civil War. So a member of the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Infantry, Ed Needham. We have a great collection that came in recently. So of course 1860s, and this was made in New York because we know there's a maker's mark on the pen, but he was using this while he was in the service and on the road during the Civil War.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, James J. Anyway, we think we all know he's our favorite Minnesota robber baron. Okay, I don't need postcards or letters or emails about that, but just he made a lot of money in railroads. So, so this is just an interesting, as you can see, it's a James J. Hill, the Empire Builder, uses Dixon's pencils. So it's a little, promotional. Use the famous business guy. He uses our pencils, so they must be good. And then tell us about the flag thing in the middle. That doesn't look like a writing utensil.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, because it isn't. That is a pen wiper. So when you have a dip pen, like Ed Needham's pen above, you're going to get a lot of ink blots. And so you need to clean off the end of your pen before you start writing, so you don't get a giant puddle of ink on your paper.
Okay, and then on the far right, we have
a pencil sharpener.
Oh.
Yeah, 1850s pencil sharpener. That's a thing. It's in the collection. Some Minnesotans will remember that Tim Pawlenty, maybe affectionately known as Teepaw, he liked to veto things when he was in office from 2003 to 2010. And he liked it so much that he got himself an oversized veto pen to do those honors. So that actually came to us through the governor's office when he left office. Yeah, the other two pieces here aren't exactly writing instruments, but
Oh.
they come up when you search pen, which is what I did.
Mhm.
So on the bottom is a batik pen. So it's bamboo and metal. It's a tool used to apply wax lines in batik. So it's a really awesome design work that is done in a lot of the Hmong handwork material that we have. So we have this great textile collection where batik is one of the methods. We got it from a business called Hmong Handiwork in
Cool.
St. Paul. They were importing a lot of things from refugee camps and then selling the materials in Minnesota, and then the proceeds would go back to those refugee communities. So pretty cool business.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And the pen kit 2015, a vaporizer pen kit. Any clues there, Lori?
Well, I see a little thumb drive.
Yeah,
And I'm not really sure what else.
right. Well, if I say Leafline Labs, does that
Um,
ring any bells?
yes, yes, it does.
So Leafline Labs is from Cottage Grove. They were one of the first two state-sanctioned medical cannabis dispensaries, and curators reached out when that law passed and when we had dispensaries approved.
Oh, okay. So this is another request. Now that we moved past writing utensils, now we're on to horns and hooves and things like that. The question was, what do we have in the collection made of those things? And barely we have something.
Of course we do.
Yay.
Yep. This set, Edward Ofstie, he was a Minneapolis firefighter, excuse me, and a Norwegian immigrant. He was born in 1860 something, and so these probably date to more like the 1890s, maybe as late as 1905. So he was making his own living room furniture. So yeah, a table and an armchair. I mean, it reminds me of a lot of things you see coming out of Texas at this time.
Oh, yeah.
But also, like you think about what this fellow had proximity to, and the South St. Paul stockyards were huge. I mean, they only closed fairly recently, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So there are a lot of horns available for use. So
Well,
here we are.
lucky him and lucky us. Yeah, these are great pieces. Awesome.
And more horn and tusk examples here. So I was searching for ivory because tusk
Mm,
doesn't come up with much in our collection, um, but ivory does.
sure.
So the fan at the top right, it's called a breeze fan, and BRISE. Although I like to think of it as the other kind of breeze. And this dates from the 1870s. So it's a folding fan with a case, and the lining of the case is purple. It belonged to an early St. Paul school teacher, Harriet Haynes, and she probably carried this at a ball given for General George Custer at Fort Snelling. Yeah, and that actually brings me right into the revolver, because this was reportedly used in 1934. This is a 38 special Smith & Wesson. It's a police revolver. So when I say 1934 and police revolver, what is that? Is this ringing any bells, Lori?
Gangsters.
Yeah, gangsters.
Yeah.
So this was used at the Lincoln Court Apartments in St. Paul. They're still there, by Detective Henry Cummings. And the donor said that Henry used this to injure John Dillinger in a shootout at those apartments. So Dillinger didn't die here, but he went back to Chicago after getting shot here, and then shortly thereafter was dispatched by Chicago PD, I believe.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, thank you for sharing that story. And then what about the necklace?
Yeah, so these are carved ivory beads in the shape of roses. It's all ivory, and then it's kind of graduated. It's strung on a big, thick braided twine,
Mm.
and yeah, it's just pretty fabulous. It's about 1930 on this piece.
So this is part one. So join us again for part two of our fabulous all request show. Thanks, Sandra.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I look forward to all the requests coming soon.